Incoming! There's too many of them! God damn!
Welcome beautiful people, Kustix here. In this video you will learn everything you need to know before playing Alan Wake 2 this Friday. Let's get to it. With new Alan Wake Experience, releasing this Friday, October 27th, I've decided to do a short recap of Alan Wake's story and its expanded universe so far. Original Alan Wake game took a great deal of inspiration from the works of Stephen King, David Lynch artistic style, and his most famous work, Twin Peaks, and also Twilight Zone TV show. Seeing this list of inspirations pretty much tunes you to the specific mind frequency, and in my case, making me very eager to dive into the game and its lore. Alan's story starts in fictional small town in Washington State, Bright Falls. He comes there with his wife for a small vacation to escape his social and artistic issues. Right after their arrival, they get the key to the cabin where Alan with his wife are planning to stay. They expected to get the key from one Carl Stuckey, but instead Alan got them from strange-looking woman in funeral outfit. When they got to the cabin on the small island on Cauldron Lake, it turns out that Alice, Alan's wife, had a plan to help him to leave the writer's block. She brought the typewriter with her, and it also turned out that there is a special clinic for artists in this town, and she already spoke with its therapist, Dr. Emil Hartman. This information made Alan mad, and he stormed off the cabin. A minute later, the light in the cabin went down and he heard Alice scream. Alan ran to the cabin just to find out that his wife fell into the lake, and he decided to jump after her and save her. Next thing we see, Alan waking up in a car crash somewhere in the woods. Alan goes through the woods to the gas station to call the police, and a lot of weird stuff started to happen. First of all, Alan starts to find the pages of the manuscript of his own writing entitled Departure, which he had no recollection of writing. That manuscript tells everything that happened or about to happen around him. Then he meets the locals. They are corrupted by dark presence. They veiled by shadows, and it requires light to dispel it. He also gets help from some ethereal figure who radiates light and looks like an old-school diver. When he finally arrives at the gas station and calls the police, it turns out that a week has passed since his arrival in Bright Falls, and there is no island with cabin on Cauldron Lake. Or rather, there was an island with cabin there, but due to small volcano eruption in 70s, it went underwater. Here's when Alan starts to question the reality and mystery starts to unravel. While Alan Wake tries to find and save his wife, he gets a new opponent, FBI agent Robert Nightingale, a true psycho who always tries to hurt or arrest Alan Wake. Although Nightingale's precise motivation for his pursuit is uncertain, it is clear he somehow discovered the impact of the Alan's manuscript on future events. Nothing special happens to him in the original Alan Wake game, but he will return in Alan Wake 2 as somebody who is sacrificed by the cult of the tree. As we go through the game, we learn that the ethereal figure in diving suit is Thomas Zane, a poet who faced a similar situation in 70s. He also lost his beloved one, Barbara Jagger, and then brought her back to life with the power of a lake. Although Zane was successful, the dark presence came back with her, possessing Barbara's body. When he realized that the Barbara that lived with him was not the real one, he cut out her heart, finding only darkness within. He wanted to make sure that everything that caused these events was destroyed, and thus used the power of the lake to write himself, the island, and everything else involved out of the existence entirely. This was likely the cause of the 1970 eruption of the Cauldron Lake volcano. However, as an emergency, Zane also wrote that any of his belongings left in a shoebox would remain in the real world. He used the lake's power to write a character called Alan Wake, who would someday come to the Cauldron Lake and defeat the dark presence using a light switch called the Clicker, imbued with magical power. After acquiring the Clicker, Alan arrives at Cauldron Lake and dove into its waters, finding himself in a surreal alternate dimension known as the Dark Place. Unlike Alan's world, the Dark Place was subjective and conceptual, making it subject to manipulation by works of art, which then manifested in reality. Alan navigated the dark presence with the aid of Zane, in the process encountering a mysterious doppelganger of himself referenced to as Mr. Scratch. Reaching the submerged cabin, Alan encountered Jagger and destroyed her using the Clicker. Realizing that the story demanded balance, Alan began writing the ending of Departure, allowing Alice to escape from the dark place while trapping himself there indefinitely. This is the end of the original game.
It's an ocean.
Alan, wake up.
In 2 extra episodes for Alan Wake game, he is still trapped in the dark place. Alan found himself pursued by Taken, seemingly controlled by an insane version of himself. Zane appeared before Alan and explained to him the Dark Place's dreamlike nature, stating that Alan had become split into two facets of his existence, with the insane Alan giving in to Alan's doubts and fears, and the rational Alan attempting to restore control. Alan worked his way through the shifting landscape of the Dark Place, evading the chaos brought into existence by the insane Alan, and eventually found his way back to the cabin. Regaining control of his other self, Alan began work on a sequel to Departure, which would allow him to escape from the Dark Place. This novel was known as Return. In the standalone spin-off titled American Nightmare, Alan is still trapped in the Dark Place and tries to escape it once again. This time around, Alan fights against his evil doppelganger Mr. Scratch. Mr. Scratch's creation was catalyzed by rumors and conspiracies about Alan, viewing him as an insane, sadistic serial killer. Mr. Scratch personified this fictionalized Alan and came to life in the real world, seeking to take over Alan's life. Alan, in an attempt to stop him, used the concept of one of his old Night Springs episodes to write himself back into reality in the non-existent town of Night Springs, Arizona, where Mr. Scratch had also appeared. Alan eventually managed to make his way to a drive-in movie theater where the ending of Return existed and was able to activate the ending, revealed to be a movie made about Alan by Alice as a tribute to their relationship. Film seemingly destroyed Mr. Scratch and depicted Alan reuniting with Alice. As Sam Lake describes it, American Nightmare represents one failed attempt to escape the Dark Place in the context of Night Springs episode, and there were many. Now moving to Remedy Connected Universe. The Remedy Connected Universe is a shared fictional universe created by Remedy Entertainment. Within the Remedy Connected Universe, standalone video games belong to a larger fictional universe and share elements of lore, characters, and story. While hints of the Remedy Connected Universe have existed for more than a decade, its official existence was not confirmed until August 7, 2020. Control's expansion AWE was the first formal crossover event in the Remedy Connected Universe, connecting the video games Control and Alan Wake. AWE takes place in the Investigation Sector, a closed sector of the oldest house formerly used to investigate various altered world events. Jessie, a Control protagonist, is summoned to the sector by an apparition of Alan Wake, where she discovers that the sector was closed off several years prior after a major breach of containment. In the sector, Jessie learns of the Bright Falls AWE, the altered world event encompassing the events of Alan Wake, including Cauldron Lake, a naturally occurring threshold in the town of Bright Falls which enabled artists' work of art to rewrite reality. Dr. Emil Hartman, a psychologist who attempted to study and control the lake's power, while a troubled artist kept at his clinic. However, after attempting and failing to do so with Wake, Hartman was confronted by agents of the FBC who took all of Hartman's research. Hartman ultimately resorted to diving into Cauldron Lake himself in a final attempt to study the forces within it. He was immediately taken over by the Dark Presence, known to the FBC as the Shadow, after which he was contained by the FBC. However, Hartman soon breached containment, forcing the FBC to abandon most of the sector. During the Hiss, main antagonistic force in the Control invasion, the Hiss entered the sector and took over Hartman and the weakened Dark Presence. The Hiss and the Presence amplified one another, twisting Hartman into a monstrous entity. Inside the sector, Jessie is contacted by Frederick Langston, who tells her to eliminate Hartman so that the sector can be retaken. All the while, Jessie visits the Ocean View Motel, where she experiences visions of Alan through a doorway marked with a spiral. Eventually, Jessie is able to reach the Bright Falls AWE area of the sector and kill Hartman, ending the threat. Langston then informs her that the FBC has received a possible AWE report from Bright Falls, but notes that the date of the report is several years in the future.
Ma'am, I'm getting something on my terminal here, an AWE alert from Bright Falls, Washington, but it might be a glitch. The date's all wrong, a couple of years in the future.
Now, Alan Wake 2 takes place 13 years after the original game. Alan has been trapped in the Dark Place all this time and was trying to escape, while in real world the FBI agent Bob Nightingale from the first game went on the ritualistic murder spree while supposedly affected by the Dark Presence. Saga Anderson, an FBI agent with a reputation for solving unsolvable cases, arrives in Bright Falls to investigate a string of ritualistic murders. The case slides into a nightmare when Anderson discovers pages of a horror story story, a horror story that starts to come true. Alan, at the same time, writes a dark story to shape reality in a desperate bid to escape. Haunted by an insatiable horror, Wake struggles to retain his sanity and beat the devil at his own game. The game features two distinct campaigns, one where you play as Alan Wake and one where you play as a new protagonist, Saga Anderson. The two campaigns will blend together, allowing you to switch between the two at various points, with the two stories both foreshadowing and echoing each other. Saga's story takes place in the Pacific Northwest, consisting of three hubs: the small town of Bright Falls, the stunning primordial forest surrounding the mysterious Cauldron Lake, and the rundown town of Watery. Alan's story takes place solely within the Dark Place, in a warped version of New York City, with his reality shifting and looping. Similar to the original, the game is a third-person shooter with players using light to burn away the darkness of the enemy and various weapons to fight against the dark forces, as well as various cult members. Unlike the first game, which was an action-adventure game, Alan Wake 2 emphasizes survival horror gameplay. Players have an inventory with limited space, where they will need to conserve their ammo and healing items. Health items themselves consist of medkits and painkillers, with safe havens only healing the player to take them out of a critical state. Players also encounter various puzzles and lockboxes that they will need to solve in order to obtain upgraded gear. Similarly to the episodic nature of the original, the narrative is divided into chapters, with each having their own missions and having an accompanying end song. Between chapters, players are returned to the hubs and are allowed to explore or move to the next chapter at their own pace. While this Saga story involves a lot of talking to various townsfolk around the area in order to progress in her environment, Alan uses an angel lamp to allow him to change a scene by transferring light from one area of New York to another. Both characters have their own mind places to help progress their stories, with Alan having his writer's room and Saga having her mind place, both of which can be accessed at the press of a button. Alan Wake 2 is set to be released on October 27, 2023 on digital storefronts for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S for $60 and PC through the Epic Games Store for $50 for Standard Edition. The game will also have two post-game expansions titled Night Springs and Lake House sometime after the launch of the game, access to which you can gain by purchasing the Deluxe Edition of the game, which costs $80 on PS and Xbox consoles and $70 on Epic Games Store. The game will be a digital-only release due to various shifts towards a digital-only market. This was also done to keep the price of the game down at launch. If you're playing on PC, you should definitely check these PC requirements out. These are pretty mind-blowing, and to avoid any frustration, I'd recommend you compare those to your specs before buying the game. And now, to address the main concern, those PC requirements are pretty nasty. Game also requires DLSS or FSR to get the stable frame rate, which is definitely concerning. And not only to the PC players, but also to PlayStation and Xbox players, so I would definitely wait for the technical reviews on this game before buying it, and embargo on those will be dropped approximately 15 hours before game release, on October 26, 9 AM Eastern Time. Thank you for watching, stay curious, and happy gaming!
Click the like button if you liked the video, leave a comment in the comment section below, and please consider subscribing to this channel if you would like to see more videos like this one.
That was awesome!